screen. That's better.
Mm-hmm. All right, Vance, it looks like, hey, I see us live. Are we live, Vance?
Oh, yes. Apparently, yes. So I'm like one step behind here.
Yeah, the greatest sin is not having was it dead silence? God, I gotta watch that old movie, Talk Radio. But yeah, here we are. Let me make sure all my stuff is done. Oh no, let's see. Here we are. Let me get all my windows going so that I can't. Yes, I think I got you here. Let me close this.
Vance, it looks like you're decorating for Christmas and Halloween at the same time. Very efficient.
Yeah, you know, all we gotta do is like change the color.
Right.
All right, awesome. Well, welcome everybody to AB Live, episode 40. And yes, this is our Halloween special, our yearly special. I don't know how long we've been doing this. I think it's well, Scott can tell us, but the theme tonight is a Gnostic Goring of sacred cows, something the Gnostics are very good for doing for many years, for many centuries, and things didn't work out very well for them. So we shall see how it goes tonight. But tonight we are going even for sacred cows in the esoterica. Nobody is safe in this season of the witch. So happy Halloween to everybody. And I hope you enjoy the show. Any house cleaning I need to do, because as always, we want people to go into the chat room so we can later take their questions, and it's always a fun conversation air in the chat room. And as many of you see, I am wearing a mask, so I am very safe from the coronavirus because I have a face covering. And with us too, somebody who's very safe from the virus is Vance Sachi. Vance, how are you doing tonight? Or did I give away your secret identity?
Oh no, yeah, I'm Bruce Wayne. You know, no, who am I? I'm okay. Yeah, recovering from the non-COVID virus, the virus fever that did nothing else but give me a high fever for a week. So what can I say? But I'm back.
All right,
oh, it makes my head disappear once in a while. So.
I could use that kind of.
Yeah, looks like you're ready for Christmas. Awesome.
That's what Chris said. But yeah, it's a Halloween decoration. We have another one for Christmas. See, there's the pumpkin. You can see the pumpkin.
Good deal. And with us, as always, we are very happy to be joined by Scott and Sandra. How are you guys doing tonight?
Yeah, we're wearing our Jehovah and Mrs. Jehovah masks tonight.
A white guy with a beard. Yeah, that's Jehovah. So we got that. And with us too, and it's been a while, we have Christian Smith. Chris, how are you doing? And thanks for coming back on Aeon Byte.
You bet. Well, thanks for inviting me. Yeah, I'm doing okay. Yeah, sorry, I'm not all costumed up like you guys. I'm just wearing my Earth body suit. That's all I got tonight for you.
Yeah, we're all wearing meat sacks, so we all have. Yeah, let me not get too Jungian to start off with, because God knows. But anyway, yes, people are starting to go into the chat room. We got Nate. Good to see you there. Oops, I just doxed him again. Ian, how you doing? Patrick, good to see you. And people are starting to come in. Again, as always, if you have questions for our guest tonight or want to talk about the audience, please write them in caps or put a lot of little question marks, so then Vance can get to your questions, and please address it to the person you want to talk to. Other than that, the usual house cleaning. The audio version will be out in a couple of days on all the podcast providers, iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, all those good places. And this is it looks like we are having yet another Halloween special on Halloween night. And this one will focus on demons and also the gnosis of one of the more underrated writers and occultists out there, the great Clive Barker. So it'll be a great evening to deconstruct his work, his ideas, and then talk about general demonology and other stuff. So really spooky stuff here. And hope you can join us. But of course, I will send out missives on all this great stuff. And I had some other stuff I was going to write, other news, but I think we should probably get to more or less the many main events we've got going. So, well, first of all, I'd like to say this is what? Oh my God, it's October 23rd. I think it's going to sound a little strange, but I'm one of the few people who don't want 2020 to end. I think I want the insanity just to go until the reality just crumbles and turns into atoms right before us. So
hold just short of the election, right? Because God knows what's going to happen after that.
Yeah, I'll talk to you then. And yeah, good point, Vince. I was going to talk about one of the reasons to do this Halloween special now is to talk about the election, because obviously Western civilization, especially Americans, are under a lot of stress. There's a lot of divide and conquer, not just out on the streets, but I think our own minds are being fragmented so we can have our own little riots inside of our heads. And I think this is all by design by the powers and principalities. So I think dealing with the election is a good idea. The most important election of our lifetime and all that other nonsense. I think at the end of the day, I know who the loser is going to be, and that's the American people, because I know the status quo for the most part will continue as the Archons continue their hold on this country, Western culture, and most of the world. But anyway, I guess I'd start with you, Scott. What do you think about the election, or how should people prepare themselves psychologically, spiritually, or any advice on dealing with 2020? Last time you were here, you gave some good advice on the virus, health, keeping yourself centered and sane. But now it's a few months later, it's almost the end of the year, it's the end of the world, and it's the election coming.
Well, I am a literally eternal optimist, which is how I think that Gnostic should be. We can have that Buddhist detachment from the chaos of the world, but the peculiar thing about it is you didn't see a lot of Gnostics committing suicide in a rush to get to the afterlife, because you asked, how did we start this Halloween Aeon Byte tradition? My first interview was Halloween of 2014, talking about God Reconsidered. So since then, I started a God Reconsidered Facebook page. I've put up 10 blogs where I've elaborated the ideas in my book, which is my book website is godreconsidered.com. And as we've gone deeper into things that I've learned since I wrote the book, and talking to you guys, listening and participating in some of your other interviews, I think that the key thing is to, and one of our interviews was called Gnosticism in the 21st Century, Daily Life in the 21st Century. And that is, it's not a contradiction to be fully involved in the world, in helping society and the reality, the material reality we live in, and at the same time, putting things in perspective. It's not an easy thing to do, but with prayer and meditation and perhaps going to a mass, whether it's a conventional one or a ritual one, or participating in any number of other self-transformative practices, you can keep your sanity. You can learn to deal with the business world that many of us are involved in, and keep working at doing good to others and treating your relationships right, and at the same time putting things in perspective. Now, without getting onto a rant, I'm an almost extinct species of being a militant moderate, or as Jerry Brown, my political hero, once called himself, a radical moderate, which means I'm extremely involved in politics, but I'm on good terms with people of different viewpoints, and I would like to see a return to. Yeah, I'm less. I was very, very involved in politics in the 80s and 90s. Got to know Harry Reid and Bill Clinton, and was there during the Reagan Revolution, and I'm less cynical about it because I've gotten to know some very good people. What the problem with the average person is, number one, is they're unbelievably uninformed. This is why Facebook has been able to exploit people's ignorance, or the Russians on Facebook and QAnon and all that kind of crap, because Americans are the most willfully ignorant people in history. As somebody once said, we're illiterate. We could read if we wanted to. Just look at how few book sales there are. You go to other countries and this is not the norm. So what I would say is, now that we're down to the wire and people are paying attention, try to read all viewpoints, try to get informed, follow your divinely inspired conscience, and you should try to make a difference. If it isn't in politics, there are many, many causes. You should try to work in the world. And the Cathars and the Manichaeans and the Marcionites and the rest of them, they weren't detached from the world, and they weren't entirely cynical. There's a lot you can do, and but you don't have to be wrapped up in the insanity. So that's kind of my take on it. I recommend that people read history. You can get a lot of inspiration. I've written about most of the presidents for Investors Business Daily. I have a leadership column there, and the founding fathers are never boring to read or learn about. There are just endless things. You can be very much inspired by the
Hey,
commitment
Scott,
of people.
getting a little bit of a feedback. What do you think about? Should he stand back or forward?
Yeah, I could stand back a little bit, or maybe turn
Doesn't
down.
make that's same.
Okay, let's see here.
It's
How is
very
that?
faint, but we're trying to get the best possible audio.
Yeah,
Right.
let's hear.
Okay, how is this better?
Same.
Same. Okay.
Yeah, you're perfectly understandable. It's just as it's like a
ghost.
I mean, I can try turning it down a little bit more and see. Is that any better?
Same.
Okay, so we may as well go for loud and blurry then, I guess. Right. Okay.
No, I think it's tolerable.
Anyway, so that's my rant.
It's a good rant, I would say. Yeah, history is history. We forget about history, and as I keep saying, as I keep quoting Mark Twain, history doesn't repeat, but it certainly rhymes. There's nothing too remarkable about today, except for the century falling apart and reality breaking down. But other than that, it's the same old, same old. So what about you, Christian? How has 2020 been for you, and how have you coped, or what takeaways do you have?
Well, for me personally, it's been terrible, but who cares about me personally, right? There's bigger things happening in this world, but I'm pretty detached actually from larger events. I'm mostly concerned about what can I affect, and if I can't affect it personally, I mean, what's there to worry about? I don't get upset over anything that happens in this world, knowing that, the world is going to be full of disasters. It always has been, always will be, as long as I'm not contributing to the disasters. That's all that I care about. But I wanted to comment on Scott's comment about how the primary problem with our society is our willful ignorance. But in my experience of late, it seems that even people who stay pretty well informed are getting caught up in conspiracy theories and all kinds of crazy thinking. Has that also been what you guys have seen?
Oh yeah, I mean, this is what I'm saying. Don't go to Facebook if you want to find out some facts. You can pick your poison as far as the media goes. Now, I've had 2,000 articles published in like ultra right media, like Investors Business Daily. So I'm on good terms with conservatives, but you have to have fact checking. I've had all 2,000 of my articles fact checked. You can't go on Facebook. It's not fact checked. QAnon, all this kind of stuff appeals to people who want to believe in conspiracy theories. And one of the things on my agenda tonight is to puncture some holes in superstitions and conspiracy theories and stuff that I think too many in the esoteric movement succumb to. As a business journalist, one of the reasons I got involved in this whole movement and writing God Reconsidered was to try to kind of bring some critical thinking to a field where there is a lot of confusion. I think it's actually surprising that if you get informed, I mean, read real experts on things and use a little logic, you can figure out a lot of things for yourself. It's not that there is no way to find truth. Yes, you want to strive for mystical experience, but if we start going through some of our favorite topics tonight, we'll make our case for why people should or shouldn't believe in something. And obviously, there's very little dogma in Gnosticism, and people are free to disagree. But, I think we should have a healthy debate.
Amen.
Amen to that. And what about you, Sandra? What takeaways do you have from this year spiritually so far?
It's overwhelming. As a woman, please don't get me started on Trump. I'll monopolize the whole conversation.
I didn't bring him up. You're
The ghost in the
living in
room.
your head, not mine.
Hey, it's Halloween. Orange Man good on Halloween.
Well.
Onward and downward is one.
Yeah. Things are only going to get stranger. I'm sure 2021 is just going to be full of more joy, and I don't think the election's going to be settled on November 3rd. Maybe not November 5th. Guy Fawkes Day. That's the day that I'm actually looking forward to. And next week, not Election Day. I think it's more authentic, but I don't think the election will be settled. And I think neither side is going to accept the winner or the loser. So we're in for a fun game. And I would say best thing you can do with Gnosis is what did Hunter S. Thompson say? And I think a cult fan gave me the quote, when the going gets tough, the weird turn professionals. So we might as well, use our craziness to our advantage and use it as armor, because it's going to get much stranger. So, and since we last talked, Scott, what do you think about the whole virus deal? I think the United States is still
So
what it's doing.
So people, I have a blog on this that is, again, on my God Reconsidered page, or if you're on LinkedIn, Scott Smith, West Hollywood, California, I have a whole blog called the myth of the distant casual transmission of COVID-19. And as I said before, nothing has changed in terms of the fundamental science of it. I come from an integrative medical background, so I don't think that vaccines and medicines and so forth are the be all. I do think the vaccine's real, germs are real. We don't have to deny that, but there are many ways that you can help protect yourself. Doctors are by and large pretty clueless. This is the only country in the world that doesn't practice integrative medicine. I went on my Mormon mission in Germany, 1970-71, they already had everything fully integrated. You could go to a pharmacist, talk to them about homeopathy or herbs. The doctors had a whole physician's desk reference on alternative medicine. They used acupuncture. And they said, we're just pragmatic Germans. We don't understand. You guys are peddling all these legal drugs that are killing everybody with their side effects. Why don't you guys practice preventive medicine? You guys wait until people are sick and then you try to rescue them, So I grew up in a family of doctors, and I kind of know the mentality, and they get one course in medical school on nutrition, and they don't remember anything, 3 years later. So you really have to be your own doctor, your own guinea pig. And I've had a long career in and out of this field. So the bottom line is, I'm a believer in masks. I was a believer in sanitizing your hands periodically and not touching your face and all that kind of stuff. You should be prudent. You don't have to be hysterical or pragmatic. I think that there's way too much fear that you're going to run into a viral cloud on your jog. You're going to get within 6 feet of somebody and you're going to come down with the Black Death and so forth and so on. I think the reactions on both sides are extreme, but I think being prudent is sensible. Again, I believe in a pragmatic Gnosticism that can live in the daily world and treat other people well, and at the same time remember the bigger picture. And the evidence for near-death experience is so compelling. There's no need for us to fear death, and try to avoid suffering if you can, and inflicting it on others. So if anybody wants the details on the science of COVID, again, you can look at my blog and post comments if you want.
Well said indeed. And I would agree with you. We are a very unhealthy society, and it shows. And I don't think the powers that be are going to do anything to reform it. I think the healthcare will continue as it's going to continue. So, well, why don't we start goring some of those sacred cows? I guess it's a bull goring a sacred cow, something like that. But maybe I should put on the mask. Can somebody play Copacabana by Barry Manilow? But no, I'm just yeah, I'm just giving away my age. Yeah, I've got like all these masks from the kids' Halloween and my wife and all that, and so I decided to raid all my old kids' Halloween masks and have some fun tonight. They're all watching Hamilton in the next room, so they're probably having a good time too. So, but oh yeah, sacred cows. We've had this talk before, Scott, and that has been A Course in Miracles. And obviously, A Course in Miracles has many parallels to Gnosticism. And A Course in Miracles has been very elevated this year by, of course, by Marianne Williamson and her running for the Democratic nominee, and Richard Smoley's book, was it A Religion of Love? And I interviewed Richard for this. You can find it on his YouTube channel. As always, Richard brings so much excellent data and inspirational information, and he has been he's been part of A Course in Miracle for much of his life, and he says it's benefited him. I don't know about Williamson. I mean, she's gotten very rich off of it. I know that, but I do like Richard's work. So anyway, what do you think, Scott, about this sacred cow in the esoteric of sorts?
Yeah, I love Richard Smoley. His How God Became God is one of the most important books on Gnosticism ever written. I read Theology of Love, and when it kind of comes down to listening to his interview and reading the book, he doesn't vouch for what I would call the fundamental theology, as it were, and claim that it's correct. He kind of likes the more loving Christian that results. This is part of Marianne Williamson's appeal, and Sandra knew her very well, and so I won't comment on that. I met her and I went to a few meetings, but if you doubt what I'm going to say, all you have to do is look closely at Smoley's book, especially towards the end, or look on Wikipedia, which has a pretty objective summary. And what it really teaches, and they don't always make this clear, is everything in this reality is illusion. We are dreaming of our separation. As it's put by Course in Miracles, we sinned by rejecting God and making a universe of time and space. Now, actually, that sounds like the demiurge. And Smoley goes on to say that, you know, there's no death because there's no body. Nothing in the world that happens is real. And yet at the same time, they have this weird paradox that you kind of run into in trying to deal with the people who believe in this. If the creation is not real, and we're really not real in this dimension, this kind of reminds me of Advaita Vedanta, which insists that everything's an illusion except Brahman. So I've asked people who are advocates of it, and that's the most popular form of Hinduism here in America, it's the minority view in India. So if it's all an illusion, why are you striving so hard to realize Brahman? Brahman is it. You're not real. Why the effort? As a matter of fact, Course in Miracles has been described by one critic as Advaita Vedanta in Christian dress. I made an argument in blog number 2 called "Is There an Objective Reality?" This is a part of my series, The Case for Gnosticism, on my God Reconsidered Facebook page, in which I said, look, you can have telescopes take photos of the universe expanding and stars and, you know, all this. It doesn't involve human observation. So this whole notion that there's no reality, it's all subjective, is simply not true. And there's plenty of evidence that these illusionists, as I call them, I think the evidence is in favor of the idea that 300 to 500 million people died of smallpox in the 20th century. Probably at least 80 million people from World War II. If you don't believe in smallpox or World War II, then we really can't have a conversation. If you want to go to a touchy-feely religion that says everything's an illusion, but be nice to your fellow illusionists, so be it. But I really think that from the standpoint of my agenda, which is to figure out what I think is true about metaphysics, Course in Miracles is an illusion.
And have you heard that it might be a CIA psyop? Have you heard anything of that theory, Scott?
That sounds like a QAnon rumor, but one that is true.
Yeah. I like that. And a little on a side note, Sandra, you were speaking of controversial cults, perhaps. You were a follower of Rashnish?
Well, I was a follower of Rashnish because I worked with my teacher, and the work he gave me was so difficult, with so much to do. When he suggested I read the first book, I got under the spell of Rashnish. And Rashnish was very, very seductive because he was like the teacher of ecstasy. So much so that it was the first real cult I got involved in. I went all the way to Oregon myself, almost became a sannyasin, wore the orange clothes, went there. There were Rolls Royces, there was guns. I read a little bit about the propaganda about Sheila and all the things that were going on, but I completely avoided. He was still listening before he took the vow of silence. This was in Oregon. And everybody there was in a state of ecstasy. It lasted quite a long time, and you don't realize till you're out of it what seduced you into it. The idea, the books were great. I have all his books to this day. I've got 150 of his books, every magazine he has ever been in and whatever. I just love that man for some reason. Now the spell was broken. I never became a real sannyasin. I walked away, and then everything fell apart. He got arrested. He went to jail. He died. And everything was crazy. But when you're in it, you don't see it. You're in a state of bliss. It's a real cult. It was really seductive. And it was really potent for me. And I remember being there and thinking all these fabulous people all involved. Everybody loved his books. He loved women. He put them on a pedestal. He really did. And he was such a strange, educated. I mean, he read every book he could possibly imagine. He was very, very, very fabulous for me at that time. Now I look back, I think what a nutcase I was. I didn't really want to do all the things I was supposed to do with my own teacher. This was a way out, a way of not confronting the work ahead of me. And that's my experience with Rajneesh, who I still to this day keep his books because they remind me of that state.
And why did you do what made you decide to leave? You said you were in a state of bliss. What made you snap out of it and leave before everything fell apart?
What snapped out of it was I saw all the conflicts there, and I read about all the things and the Rolls Royces and the propaganda and people fainting in his presence. Really and truly, they fainted because just the sight of him, the smell of him would make them just faint in bliss. And I think I just came to the realization that it was a big money-making machine, and that the guy was really crazy. He was nuts. And my end result was he was nuts, but a great writer.
Do you think Marianne led a cult?
Well, Marianne came at a different time. This is right after the AIDS thing. All the gays needed a lot of validation. They needed love. They needed acceptance. She gave these fabulous inspirational meetings. I went to them myself. Took my mother, who was so negative. My mother fell in love with her with no background whatsoever. She was very, very wonderful and very, very embracing. And then it seemed like, years later, I recently met her, 25 years later.
You were close. You and your mother were close.
Me and my mother were close to her at the time when we knew her. And then that was some time ago. She was going through some personal problems, and she kind of adopted my own mother as her own mother, truly. And it was remarkable because she was a fabulous speaker. Her voice and her way of presenting her information was wonderful. And the gays absolutely ate it up and loved it beyond belief. But I met her years later, as I said. She loved my art, and I didn't recognize her. 25 years had gone by. And I said to her, she said, I love your art. I said, so what do you do? With a rather patronizing tone to my voice. I'm a writer. I said, what have you written? What have you written? She's well, I was involved with Course in Miracles. I said, that's not so. That's Marianne Williamson's work. She said, I am Marianne Williamson. It's true. This was, how long ago was that?
Yeah, a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
right before she ran for president.
I didn't recognize it.
Yeah. Anyway.
Very interesting. And would you say I would say she's an authentic spiritual person. Obviously, I wouldn't, for whatever flaws I might have. What do you think?
She was authentic spiritual person.
I think she really thinks she is. I really think she has a fabulous message. I think that she is very, very upbeat. Even listening to her when she ran for president, she had a following. She has an authentic tone to her. I think she really believes it. I think she really authentically believes she is the person she represents. Indeed.
Oh, I agree. I attended one of her rallies here, and I think she's the real deal. Obviously, not the deal that America needs, because she's way too extreme for most people. But I think that if we were a more enlightened society, maybe should be the right kind of person to pull things together for us.
I think she's the real deal for an illusion.
That's very
Now,
funny.
I do, yeah. I mean, I do agree with Scott that the Course in Miracles is kind of an illusion. So I don't buy into her metaphysics, but I like her politics.
Oh, okay. And why do you disagree with the metaphysics of A Course in Miracles, Christian?
Well, so I agree with everything that Scott said here. I often disagree with Scott, but on this point, he's right on the money all the way down the line. And I'll just add to a little bit of what he said. So my main problem with ASIM, even though A Course in Miracles, even though, yeah, it has a lot of Gnostic elements to it, it fundamentally is anti-Gnostic because it denies the reality of suffering and evil. And it kind of pisses me off, to be honest, because it does it in such a way as to be absolutely seductive. It uses such elevated ideas that sound so enlightened. It uses such beautiful language, and it has a lot of great messages in it. But the fundamental message is that suffering isn't real. and I think it's almost karmic justice that at the end of the life of what's her name, the author, she actually ended up refuting the book because she was going through terrible suffering in her life.
No.
And there's reports about how she said that she hated the book and called the followers cultists, and it kind of speaks to the fundamental flaw in the book, which is that it doesn't actually address people. It doesn't address suffering in any substantial way, because all it does is deny it. It says that the real miracle of forgiveness is to come to a state of enlightenment where you realize that there really is no evil, there really was no suffering, it's all just an illusion. Therefore, there's nothing to forgive. So that's the big miracle. Forgiveness is the big miracle, and it's based on the idea that there's nothing to forgive. And I say, well, that's a pretty weak miracle compared to the kind of forgiveness that I think God is capable of. So in my theology, first of all, suffering is absolutely real, even if the world is Maya in some sense, even if it's an illusion pulled over our eyes to make us, believe certain things, whatever. The fact is that our experiences are real, and the suffering is real, regardless of whatever the objective reality is. Like, subjectively, our suffering is real. And the real miracle of forgiveness is that God is able to take suffering and genuine evil and not just say, oh, that doesn't exist, which is like the worst insult to somebody who is going through some severe suffering, is just to say, oh, your suffering isn't real. No, what God does is he says, I'm there with you, I'm suffering with you, and I'm going to take that suffering and do something good with it. I can transmute it. I can pull something good out of what is evil. This is where people get confused, unfortunately, into thinking that evil's not real, because there is this ability for God to help us transmute or redeem evil and turn it into something good. And so people think, oh, well, actually, the good was just there all along and evil was just an illusion. No, the whole miracle of redemption or forgiveness is based, it presumes the evil is real. Otherwise there's nothing to transmute, there's nothing to forgive, there's nothing to redeem. So that's my take on things.
Well said. And for the audience, do you want to share, you are actually you're studying to be a priest, right?
Yes, it's a very slow process.
It always is, yeah.
But I'm moving along step by step in the process of becoming a Gnostic priest, and as part of that, I'm also attending a school of theology, and the main focus of my studies is process theology. So that's where a lot of my comments come from, is that process theology perspective based on the philosophy of Alfred North Whitehead. But I'm here in LA studying the sacraments under Dr. Hoeller. So.
Oh, wonderful. From the Ecclesia Gnostica.
That's right.
That's awesome. Yeah, I still like to watch his videos. He's still putting out videos, and they're very cool. I think he did the Hem of the Pearl last time. And that's always a greatest hit when it comes to Gnosticism. So awesome. And quickly, what is process theology for the audience that might not know?
Process theology is a kind of postmodern philosophy and theology, depending on how you look at it. It's sort of a philosophy that yielded a theology that is pretty Gnostic in many regards. It's based on the denial of classical substance metaphysics, which define God as a sort of impassible, absolute, unmoved mover. And process says, no, that's not what God is. Or that might be part of what God is, but that's not a complete description. God is fundamentally relational and is capable actually of change. God is not some sort of abstract principle. God is a living, changing being that exemplifies love, as opposed to, say, a kind of love in a radical way, what we humans understand as love, as opposed to some sort of like abstract concept of selfless love that isn't really emotional, which the classical theologians called agape, which they said was love, but without passion or some kind of nonsense like that. So that's a little bit of what process is about.
Oh, well, thank you for that and appreciate it. Well, Vance, do you have a comment or a question from the audience?
Yeah, I was just thinking about all this stuff for the Course in Miracles, which I'm a little bit familiar, not a practitioner of it. So much is tied up in words, our language and our words. What kind of suffering? What kind of pain? You know, you got to dig back down and get into experience. You know, evil. Well, somebody bats me on the head, you know, I consider that evil, but that's because my definition of evil is anything that causes me physical harm. But when you get into the psychological harm, this is where, when you get into the Course of Miracles, is a way of listening to what they say. Because for a long time, I had a manager that was really into the Course of Miracles. I was going through a tough time with a very irascible fellow, let's see, or a vendor of ours, let's say, and which has since resolved itself and very nicely. But he always said, "Oh, the dream, life is a dream," and everything. So, but the thing is, so much of our suffering is self-generated because of the little word games and programs that we put into ourselves. So that's another kind of pain, suffering, evil. And I think Course in Miracles was originally rooted from a palliative psychological standpoint, because they were psychologists, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they made it kind of into a religion. And what you tell, if you're a therapist, what you tell people is you point out their own role and their own responsibility in it. And from that standpoint, there is no evil, quote unquote, because what most people think is evil, whatever, like let's say the election. Oh, yeah, the election. Well, you know what? Take a step back from it. Stop reacting to it. Start listening. Then take another approach to it. And then it's not suffering. It's maybe a little bit annoying, which is a tiny bit. But you see what I'm saying? It's all how you approach it. Now, when it comes to sickness and real pain, the experience of that, that's another whole thing. You can't really compare that with things that you can do something about. So that's kind of my quick thoughts on Course in Miracles. It's
Awesome.
And you know, as far as illusion is concerned, Scott and I have talked about this before on previous shows. I think there is such a thing as a world within a world. And it's very clear that there's another world beyond this one to me. And the reason I have one thing that I always say, forgive me if I'm repeating it, the laws of the universe, what makes an electron negative, what makes a proton positive, all this kind of thing, what makes quarks, those laws are not written anywhere in what we call the material universe. Energy, it's like you can't find any of that. There's another kind of meta world where all this is defined, and so much more. You know, this is just little things that we observe, and we come up with all these laws. There's something beyond this. So there's such a thing as maybe this is relatively a construct within a larger construct. And from that standpoint, but still, I agree with Scott, we have to deal with it. It's like maybe it's an illusion, but it's like a dream that you don't wake up from, you know, or you wake up from every morning. And you know, it's like Philip K. Dick says, reality is anything when you stop believing it, it's still around.
Yep.
So that's what I have to say. Statira Talaya was wondering if anybody knows about the Baha'is and if they're similar to the Course in Miracles. Anybody know about Baha'is? Oh, Chris does.
I'm thinking about this. Okay, so are they similar to the Course in Miracles? I don't know how to answer that, to be honest.
They believe that the world is an illusion, or the, you know, the Advaita type thing, or no?
No, they're not like the Advaita Vedantists as far as I understand.
They're Islamic based, aren't they, or related?
They're syncretic. Yeah, they're a mixture.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But they do come out of, yeah, they are they originated, of course, in Iran, and so so there's a heavy Sufi influence on their thinking, and Islam in general is sort of the base from which they come. But they are syncretic, yeah. Yeah, I mean, they incorporate ideas from Christianity and Judaism, Zoroastrianism. Yeah.
Are they overly love and light, as she wants to? And I would say yes. You know
I would
why?
say-
I went to a Seals and Crofts concert in the 70s.
Oh, wow. Oh, cool.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, Hummingbird, Don't Fly Away and all that. Anyway, after the concert, they said, anybody who wants to learn about the Baha'i religion, you can stay and we're going to give a talk on it. So I did. And so we sat down, you know, everybody sat down on the floor and they were there and they talked to them and they tried to convert us to the Baha'i religion. So I mean, it sounded good, you know, I mean, love and light and all that type of thing. I remember that. They believe in, they're very pro intermarrying between races and so forth. They felt that in order to unify the world, people would have to intermarry so that there weren't so much conflict between the races. So that was very clear to me. And
yeah, it's a beautiful religion. I love it. The only issue that I have with it, and this isn't really necessarily an issue with the religion itself so much as the Baha'i people, the practitioners haven't perhaps allowed themselves to integrate a certain amount of social change into their religion regarding their attitudes towards homosexuality, and to some extent they've got some other gender issues as well, such as not allowing women to serve on the International House of Justice. So they've got some issues there. My main problem with them is about not basically condemning homosexuality. But other than that, I think that they're beautiful. And in many ways, they're similar to the Theosophical Society as far as their vision for the world, because they are seeking to unite all of the world's religions, which is rather interesting as, you know, a religion in themselves. That's a rather ambitious project, a religion that seeks to unite all of the other religions. So that's a difficult project to do. I would think the Theosophical Society's approach would be a little easier, rather than being a religion serving as a medium for religions to interface with each other. It makes a little more sense to me. But that is the Baha'i vision, is a united world that's not only united religiously but politically. And you know, there's probably a lot of people that are afraid of like one world conspiracies and such, but I think the Baha'i are actually on the right track with this. That's just my personal opinion.
I'd like to gore the sacred cow.
Yes.
Yeah, so far nobody's touching Baha'i. Everybody.
Yeah, well,
here's
Scott
take a stab.
Yeah. Yes, I think the people in Baha'i, like many Buddhists and many Freemasons and Sufis and so forth, you know, you can, I grew up Mormon, I think very highly of most of the Mormons, and, you know, you can lead a very good ethical life and spiritual life, regardless of your particular religion. Sandra and I love traveling in Muslim countries. We really enjoy Islamic society. But from a metaphysics point of view, first of all, there's a famous book, I forget the author's name, called God Is Not One. You know, the liberal movement is to say, you know, all religions are really teaching the same thing. No, they're not. You know, if you're really interested in metaphysical truth and not just making nice with everybody, you have to make some decisions. Where I became disillusioned with Baha'i was my first book was called, was on, or actually was it my second, third? I forget. Anyway, 1994, I published a book called The Soul of Your Pet. And it was, it's still on Amazon. It's having an afterlife there, but it was on the evidence for the souls of animals. So I started calling around to the different religions to find out if they believed that animals had souls. I think that I made a very compelling argument that there is really surprisingly massive evidence that animals do survive death. Some animals, at least the animals that we are companions with. And I compiled this book based on a lot of really amazing evidence from people who never had a supernatural experience in their life. They weren't religious, and they didn't even have a connection with the animal ghosts they encountered. But at the end, I went through and showed how the Bible conceded that animals had souls similar to humans. And so I started calling other religions, and the Baha'i told me, nope, we don't believe animals have souls. And one of the famous psychics that Sandra knew once told her, and he was otherwise, I think, correct about things. He said, nope, animals don't have souls. Well, I think the evidence is otherwise. So I think that their goals are admirable, their society is admirable, but I think they're, the notion that all religions are really the same thing is wrong, and I think they are certainly wrong about the idea of animals having souls. So I'm not going to stick the knife any further in. I don't want to kill them, but I just bleed a little bit for Halloween here.
Let me just add to comment. So whatever Baha'i told you that was misinformed. And no, the Baha'i scriptures teach that animals have souls. So I don't know where that guy was coming from, but I think that you're right about there being a problem with the Baha'i project of uniting all religions. As a religion that is seeking to unite all other religions under you, how do you do that without basically conquering the other religions and just assimilating them into your own religion?
Eggs to make that omelet, huh?
It's politics again, right?
Yeah. So they've got a real challenge. You know, they would like to preserve the diversity of the world's religions. So they do see the problem, but I think overcoming it is perhaps an impossibility. And that's where I would favor the Theosophical Society's approach, which is why I'm a member of the Theosophical Society and not a Baha'i.
Awesome.
Maybe it's so much not does God exist or like, well, who isn't God, right? That's the big argument between the religions. Who isn't God? Like Gnostics figure, well, we all have the divine spark, and mystics say actually we're all God, like manifesting in different spots, and the Catholics say no, you know, God is God, Jesus is God, Holy Ghost is God, and everybody else is a worm. So and along with the Protestants, and I'm not sure what the Islamic faith teaches, pretty much the same thing, but that's the big dividing line, you know, who's God and who's not.
Clapton is God as far as I'm concerned. At least that was the old.
Oh yeah, we have to tip our hat to Van Halen, right? And
oh yes.
And the amazing Randy, the gore, you know, cosmic cow gorer of all time, left the earth. And I hope that when he sees the light, the flying saucers come through, and the psychics say, "We know what you're thinking." Yes, no, you can't know what I'm thinking. You can't be psychic. That's my hope for amazing Randy.
Yeah, I'm sure Scott probably has a lot to say about that passing.
Yeah. I read Randy's book on Uri Geller before Sandra and I tested Uri for Fate magazine or Psychic, whatever that was. Anyway, we're going to test Uri, and I was a skeptic about Uri. Sandra actually had a long relationship with Andrei Puharich, who brought Peter Hurkos and Uri Geller to America. But anyway, we had this assignment, and I was convinced that Uri was a phony because I read James Randi's book about Uri. And later on, when I read Scott Rogo's book about something like, something on the order of, evidence for the paranormal, where he goes through all the tests that Uri had gone through up at SRI, Stanford Research Institute. There's no question that Uri had real powers, but I was brainwashed by James Randi, and I went into the interview, and James Randi instructed you on how to trick Uri and how to deal with him. And, and I found out he was just wrong. And Scott Rogo goes into great detail where his criticisms are uninformed and stuff like that. So I think that James Randi is not in hell because Gnostics don't believe in that. I think he's in some kind of limbo. Dr. Hoeller and I agree that, based on the evidence from near-death experiences, people seem to go into some kind of dimension for those of similar consciousness, which is a factor in why they seem to be greeted by those of their own faith. We talked in that recent debate on reincarnation about how the spirits in the other world, some of them want to be reborn. And there's this whole debate going on, is it a good thing to be reborn or not and stuff. And the Mormons always taught people don't change their personalities or their religions once they die. Just because you're dead doesn't mean that you're any wiser about metaphysics. I remember that George Anderson, the great medium, once he was a believer in reincarnation. He asked his dead sources, is reincarnation true? And they said, well, we've heard about it. So if you're already dead and you still haven't figured that part out, I guess there's a lot of mysteries on the other side. And James Randi is in kindergarten, apparently, from what I've heard.
But Scott, if we are to, you talking about personalities don't change throughout time, different dimensions, but what if the Buddhists are right and there is no authentic self, or we can't know ourselves? We're just a whole bunch of skandhas Legoed together.
Yeah.
And I know Buddhists will get mad at me for this, but sorry, guys. Buddha said Nirvana and samsara were separate. He said certain things, and then later on it got corporatized. But the original teachings of the Buddha, which I think are pretty punk rock, I like them. They're edgy. They're, I like that kind of dark existential vibe. But anyway, enough.
Yeah, well, let me gore the ultimate sacred cow, the Dalai Lama.
Speaking of CIA.
Yeah. Listen, I admire Pope Francis. It doesn't mean I agree with Catholic theology. I admire the Dalai Lama. But here are my problems with Buddhism. And I've got a whole sample chapter at godreconsidered.com on this. First of all, I think I have read Sam Harris and all the atheists and the Buddhists and stuff about their arguments that there is no self. I think it's contradicted in a number of ways. What they start doing is they get confused because they say, well, we're different than we were years ago. Yes, and our bodies change cells completely about every 7 years. It doesn't mean we are not still the people that we are. The near-death experiences show that we survive death. I discussed in God Reconsidered and in some of my blogs on afterlife, there is extremely compelling evidence for afterlife. The skeptics want to deny this. And likewise, the personality continues into at least the next life. What they get, where Sam Harris and the others get confused, is they say, well, there's two sides of the mind, and sometimes one gets paralyzed, and there's a subconscious. All of this is true. It doesn't mean that there is not a soul that leaves the body at death and carries with it some of the personality. Personalities can evolve. When I say that we don't change, I mean, we don't suddenly become enlightened just because we're dead. This is the problem with most psychics, most prophets, and so forth. They think that any angel who comes and visits them, and I knew Mormons who had angels appear to them or entities, that they must be speaking the truth. Course in Miracles, this was told to us, it must be true. Just because some supernatural intelligence tells you something, it may be the other world's version of Facebook. The fact of the matter is that there are competing religions in the next life. The Virgin Mary appears every so often to apparently convince people of Catholicism. I interviewed a famous member of Hare Krishna who wrote about all the Hindu deities who would appear to Hindus and, convince them that Hinduism was the real thing. So going to Buddhism, there is a lot of compelling evidence for the self. That doesn't mean that your consciousness or your self doesn't change over time. Now, The other problem I have is this notion to kind of do a different twist on what Vance was talking about. Yes, Buddha's teaching that that one of the principal goals is to kind of to get some perspective on suffering, that much of it's self-inflicted. I think the problem with Buddhism is that it emphasizes too much this notion of your perception. Yes, it's been shown that people suffer from divorce or the Holocaust if you survive the death camp. Amazingly enough, about 3 months is the average time from trauma where you think you will never marry again until you're on eHarmony. People are resilient. Homeostasis, which is kind of getting back to our normal kind of calmer self, is very good at causing us to be resilient. Yes, there are lessons to be learned from adversity. That doesn't mean that the great metaphysical truth is that suffering is all in our minds. I think where the Buddha, think about the way things were in 600 BC compared with today. We've got vaccines, we know something about nutrition, we don't have the average historical and prehistorical 25% of children dying. We don't have that much suffering going on in comparison in terms of like the physical world. The notion that suffering, the biggie, is your attitude towards it, I think is wrong, and I think it's misplaced and too much emphasis is put on. I honor the Theravadic approach to Buddhism, but let's remember the Theravada was at the time of Buddha's death, there were already 18 different sects. They didn't agree while Buddha was teaching what the teaching was. And then the notion that Mahayana Buddhism, which came 500 years later, somehow got the real revelation when people were ready for it. I think that's crap. I think that Mahayana Buddhism appeals to the masses. It says it's not for the esoteric. It's not just for the priests to get to enlightenment. It's for the masses. And that has great appeal. But as I list in my book, if you start studying the different Buddhist sects, they are radically different. Hinduism just says, hey, we're a big family of kind of related religions. Buddhism tries to pretend like they're all teaching the same thing, but they're ready to excommunicate each other. So I think that Buddhists have something to teach us in terms of living a calm life, but from my point of view, it's got the wrong metaphysics. And I think that there is a tendency in Buddhism to minimize evil as a real thing. So I'm not a big fan of it, but it's better than being a fundamentalist evangelical Christian or a bomber from some Islamic company.
Well, it seems the theme tonight is we're goring these syncretic one world religions who deny suffering and evil and all that. So it's obviously all of this is a plot by the CIA and the Illuminati to make us weak and get COVID and lower our immune system and I don't know, buy New Age books or calendars. So
Evil
we are guarded. We are guarded. Anyone else would like to speak to this about Buddhism or the self? Vance, Christian, Sandra?
Well, I think
Skandhas are all listening.
Evil is the sacred cow, and I think we should go that. Because what kind of evil? Where does it come from? I got my own idea. I think evil is the little bugs in the logical system that makes up the physical and energy universe. The little conflicts that can't be resolved, the paradoxes that every logical system has to contain, life and death, all these different things. But I think it's kind of, when we talk about evil, you got to be really careful, because how about intentional evil? Somebody that plans it, that like enjoys the suffering of others, that likes to trap people. That's trapping people is a big game. Hunters do it, right? Hunters trap, and they're humans that trap other humans. They go after them like game, like every political system, every political season. We're all game for these big, hunters. They're all hunting us down. And it's like, Trump is killing people with COVID. And then, like, no, Joe Biden's killing people by doing this or that. I mean, it all comes down to that, right? Like
They're
just
hunting Hunter Biden, it seems.
fear. Yeah. Fear. Oh God, let's not get into that, I'm selling copies of his laptop hard drive, by the way, if anybody wants it. Not really, but I get. But we had somebody wanted to know, Astrox Foundation. We have a whole foundation online with us tonight. Wanted to know if is any religion that anybody knows of here in the group present the idea that the soul can choose reincarnation or not, that it's actually a choice as opposed to being forced on you.
Well, that's what Plato said in the myth of, was it Ur? You do get a choice where you're going to be in the next life, but you have to drink the waters of Lethe or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
You choose, you drink of the lot, and then you forget. But your soul's already has been working on your next life. You can choose a dictator and all that. So, but
he really was a religion and a philosophy, huh? There wasn't really much difference.
There wasn't a difference back then, and it was a way of life. Being a philosopher is just being a mystic.
I think we've evolved from there, huh?
But I don't know any other religions where you would choose that. You guys can, unless I'm missing.
Gnosticism, because you can write your own gospel.
The Jedi.
Ah,
do the Jedi believe this?
Hey, Darth Vader reincarnated. We saw him, right? Well, no, he didn't reincarnate. They were used in the afterlife because he was
as a shitty actor.
Does that thing have a built-in vape?
Darth Vapor.
By the way, I'm jealous of everybody. Everybody has vapes, and I don't vape, so I got myself this.
With regard to choosing reincarnation, what I would say is go listen to the debate we had a few months ago on Aeon Byte.
Oh, let's not talk about reincarnation.
Is reincarnation real? We'll leave it at that, because otherwise we'll get off.
Sure. Well, we answer the question, so that's fair.
Yeah.
Experts. That's something we can gore.
That's how to play it.
Experts.
What about, another sacred cow, you might say, especially in Halloween, the idea of spirits, the idea of witches, and the idea of divination, tarot, astrology, all these wonderful, all these disciplines and occult exercises. Scott or Sandra, is this a sacred cow you dare to gore?
Yeah, what do you think about astrology, witches, and women?
I think most astrologers are just very good body readers. They can sense and smell depression. They can tell the person what they want to hear. I don't think they have much talent at all. I think they're very intuitive. And I think they say things like, you're at a crossroads, a relationship is coming into your life, there's a financial thing coming to you. It's very, very powerful. Whatever the person seems to demand, I don't really have much faith in them. I don't think
you're talking about psychics, right?
What about psychics? And yes, that would apply to psychics too.
No.
She was saying astrologers specifically.
Psychics.
Oh, okay.
I've only met two in my life that ever impressed me. Peter Herkos, who was the most unbelievable psychic in the world, had a handicap. He couldn't communicate well. He was from Holland, kind of a man that did not speak English well. I saw him for 20 years of a very close friendship. And I watched him do miracles. I watched him do fabulous things. He was brought over to this country by Andre Paharish, who brought over Ori a little later. And the last time, all together, it was Andre Paharish, Ori was on stage. Peter Herkos was in the last month of his life. He had lung cancer. And Art Kunkel was at the table. Some fabulous heavyweight people, unbelievable backgrounds. But Peter Herkos was by far, in my opinion, the real thing. Ori too, different area. He bent metals, he was much more materialistic, much more money-minded. Peter was the real McCoy. And somehow he had gotten a lot of criticism in the world too, because he was not a good communicator. But I was there. I knew it for 20 years, 20 long years.
What about witches?
Well, witches are, in my opinion, the thing. That's the planet, the fabulous, magical planet we live on. This is the miracle. This is the magic right here. I don't know what all this other stuff is about. Seriously, that's really where I feel is everything shines. It's a miracle of miracles.
But what about, are there witches today?
I don't know about witches today.
What about your own experience?
My own experience has been fantastic. I'm, an exception, I feel. I feel I worked with my teacher for many years, and I've had the life you cannot believe with him. And I had the experience. I did not have one bit of regrets. Not
About
one.
what?
About having that opening.
But
that
what about you? They don't know what you're talking about.
Teacher.
No, about your magic.
Well, the magical experience I had with him is I always was very insatiable minded, curiosity beyond belief. And I studied and looked. After I had a near-death experience, not once, but twice, I went from being kind of semi like, Ayn Rand and Nietzsche and kind of like cynical kind of intellectual areas I was into, Das Kapital, all the things that I felt I was interested in. When I had the first near-death experience, it altered my whole mind to such an extent that nothing else would do ever again. Then I put all my attention on the esoteric, all my attention on the metaphysical, and read, everything you can think of, anything to do with hermetics, the Book of the Dead, everything you can think of, and somehow ended up in California, ended up meeting, after a lot of work, a lot of study, meeting a man that I didn't think was really anything much. He turned out to be the real teacher. And he took me into a realm that the first experience I had with him, I once described in another program, so I don't know if you're familiar. Remember that?
Well, just give the headline.
The essence was, he came over one night, it was 1974, about the time I met Scott. And he came over on a motorcycle. I figured he's not a candidate for anything. I'd already met and been around a few people who had written fabulous books. They didn't cut the mustard. They didn't have the power, nothing. So this man, I really didn't have much confidence in. He came to my house. He changed my world. I'd never been so frightened and scared of anything in my entire life. He put me into a state in the magic circle, which I was not familiar with other than reading about it. If I know what I was getting into, I never would have done it, of course. I was so scared that it was like Rosemary's Baby. It was like Exorcist. And that was my first major experience with this man. When the doors open, windows open. I mean, things happened that were, I told Scott about it. I just met Scott. He knew I was telling him the real experience. And I was with this teacher for 8 years of working with him. And I was a student. I was only an apprentice, only a vessel. I was not him, but I was a vessel. And that had really been the high point of my life. If everything ever happened to me, this was the main thing that ever happened, the main goodie. This was more important than anything else. That set me on my path, of course, more so than ever. And everything else is a shadow compared to that first experience. And it got better and better and better and better for 8 years, miracle after miracle. When he passed away, again, I was not him, but I had the experience of 8 years of being with him. And now at this point, I'm into other things too. But that had colored my entire life, made my life worth living 100%. That was the main experience of my whole existence, was that experience with him.
She's the only real witch I've ever known.
So because of that, now I'm even more tempted. Now my interest never has gotten less, but it's been a fabulous life for me because of him, because of his teacher. He opened up that door to the invisible door that no one ever, I've never met anybody other than one man, I think, Hans Finch. Really, it's undescribable. What did you think, Scott, when I first told you?
Yeah. Well, I knew her teacher, and she doesn't disclose his name. He was controversial even within paganism, but yeah, he was the real deal. So there are witches out there. I know Sandra got into trouble a few years ago when she said she was skeptical that, there was anybody who could do real magic, but obviously there are some out there.
Hey, I think it's time for a spooky witch Halloween story, a true one. You guys ready for this? When I was a kid, we had cats, and one of our cats had kittens. Now, my mother, very mysterious Scorpio woman, no longer with us, unfortunately, had a half sister. And this half sister considered herself a witch. Okay. So one time when my half aunt Sandra was over, she begged us for one of the kittens. So my mother gave her a little gray kitten. Not too long after that, we received from Sandra a jar, and it was there was a note on it that said it's tomato marmalade. All right, and it had an inverted cross on it and a bow tied around. It was like a mason, one of these ball jars that you can things in, and it had a bow tied around it. Now, my mother took one look at this, and my mother knew her half sister pretty well, and she said, "This isn't any tomato marmalade." Now, you guys could guess what it was. All right.
Go on again.
So now it gets worse. So I said, "Mom, what are you going to do with this?" And so yep, that's right. So Artie got it right. She took the bow, untied it, didn't open the jar, reversed the bow, put it on, and sent it back to Sandra. 2 months later, Sandra was dead. Hepatitis.
Holy moly.
Yep, she was a drug user. And they lived in the East Village and so forth. True story.
Wow.
So guess who the witch really was? She tried to curse the family by taking, that's typical black magic, right? You take something that belonged to the family, something alive, right? You sacrifice it, put it in a jar. So anyway, I thought we should have a spooky Halloween story. That's true. It's a true story. And my mother always said, "No, I'm not a witch. I'm not a witch." But you know what? My mother was very mysterious, and she never admitted to things. But how did she know how to do that?
Well, my wife, what a Orthodox Catholic and now Orthodox Greek. She knows every spell in the book. It's what you do. You got to cover your bases. So, and she's done binding spells and all that. So, the Catholic Church is it's very magical when you look under the hood. So.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. So. Well, that's pretty spooky, Vance. Glad it worked out.
Yep. I'm here to tell about it.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And so divination. What do you guys think about tarot? I to make my friend happy. Obviously, I've had some great tarot readings from different people, and both fortune telling and also understanding my inner architecture and inner world. So for me, and it depends on the reader. Again, like it depends on the witch, the practitioner, the person. So, but what do you guys think?
Well, I respect Stephan Hoeller. I don't always agree with him on everything. No Gnostics agree with anybody else, of course. We're anarchists and libertarians by nature, I think. But if you want to hear kind of the pro-esoteric interpretation of the Tarot and Kabbalah, which are linked, if you go to gnosis.org, Stephan Hoeller has a full series on both of these things. And he has a book out called The Fool's Pilgrimage, Kabbalistic Meditations on the Tarot.
Yeah,
However,
that's a good book.
His argument is that these are archetypal images, and that even though no scholar of the Kabbalah believes that there's a connection with Tarot, he argues that there could have been, because they kind of came out of the same realm in northern Spain, roughly the same time. This idea was propagated by Eliphas Levi, and in Robert Uzel's biography of him, I think he dispels the idea that Levy was really onto something. You know, Levy said, well, the Tarot has 22 major arcana, and there are 22 paths in the Kabbalah. But then when you read further, he gets into numerology, like there's 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet, 22 chapters in Revelations, and he kind of goes off on a tangent. Gary Lackman, who's been a guest on your show, one of the great esoteric writers, I was recently reading his book, Secret Teachers of the Western World, and he said, you know, Levy's speculations on this were wrong. Now, Hoeller had a chance to talk with Gershom Scholem, who's the great Kabbalistic scholar, and Scholem said there's no connection with the Tarot. And Hoeller said, well, what about the fact that you can use the archetypal images and meditate on the tree of life that is part of Kabbalah, and you can have your consciousness change? And he said, well, I can't argue with that, which Hoeller kind of took as saying, hey, you know, you're the authority. This whole linking of the two is one thing. I think the bigger problem with, first of all, Hoeller would say, and Sandra and I have had experience with divination using Tarot. It goes back, it's like astrology, you know. If you want to believe in something that is basically a superstition but gives meaning to life, you know, pick your poison. You can, if you get a psychic Tarot reader or somebody who claims to be a psychic and so forth, you know, as Sandra said, body language, maybe they have some ESP, you know, they can tell you some things. The problem with a lot of the psychic stuff is selective memory. People remember the hits. You know, Sandra and I did a lot of investigation for Fate magazine of so-called psychics, and some of the best ones do have an impressive record. Bevy Jagers of St. Louis, for example, worked on a lot of murder cases, and I interviewed the police. But you know, it's kind of like I used to read the astrology column by Sidney Omar, and I would think, wow, he really understands Virgos, and then I'd realize I was looking at the wrong sign. You know, you can give feedback and use tarot or any of these other things and provide some meaning in your life. With regard to this connection with the Kabbalah, I'd like to make a point that I think gets overlooked it doesn't get discussed by Hoeller, and I think it is overlooked by Gnostics who are enthusiastic about it, and that is, go to the source, the Jewish Kabbalah. What do you find out? Well, if you take a distant relative of my ex, Arthur Kurzweil, who's one of the most respected teachers in this field, and he doesn't even mention Tarot in Kabbalah for Dummies. And I should add, if you look up Buddhism, dummies, any of these things, the Idiots and Dummies books pick scholars who know how to communicate, which means they can't blow smoke, which the Buddhists are famous for. You have to talk clearly because you're dealing with a lay, uninformed audience. So if you go into it, then you find out a few things that I don't think are compatible with Gnosticism. Number one, they have a really bizarre idea trying to distance Jehovah, who is the God of the Kabbalah. They try to distance him from the creation by a lot of clever, complicated methods. And when you get down into it, what it says is, yes, God created the world. Who is the God who created the world according to the Gnostics? Jehovah. And of course, Jehovah supposedly revealed the Old Testament, which the Hasidim, who are the ones who are advocates of the Kabbalah, also study. And what you get down into it when you finally hit is that the teaching that what appears to be evil is really a blessing, because everything is for the best. Everything has a divine purpose. Creation was a good thing. Never mind the plagues. Never mind the mental illness and the
destruction. Yeah, but it's got in some of them, like Isaac Luria does talk about a cosmic cataclysm. There wasn't God. God kind of crumbled and broke down, and
Yeah,
we
yeah.
have to help him.
But
We
at
have to
the end,
help God rescue his own body.
well, you can interpret it that way, but at the end of the day, he is still the creator. And when you get down to what it means for our lives, what they say is God is perfect. The central teaching, according to Kurzweil, is that God is perfect. Everything is for the best. But they say, listen, evil is a blessing, including the Holocaust. But don't talk to outsiders about it because they won't understand that. And as long as you insist that the creator, one way or another, that this had a divine purpose, a good purpose and stuff, you're never going to escape that trap. Again, if you go to my Facebook page on God Reconsidered, I have my blog number 10 goes into great detail about what all religions want to overlook. And that is that the creation was not a great idea. And that's a central idea in Gnosticism, even though we can disagree about the details. But Gnosticism is the only religion that can really say, you know something, the demiurge, whether he was ignorant or a bad guy, he's not the high God. The believers in Kabbalah ultimately believe in Jehovah. The Hasidim study the Torah and all that kind of stuff. It's a more mystical approach. If you want to be Jewish, it's better than Orthodox Judaism, but the Hasidim are ultra Orthodox. You know?
Yeah, and you've got you got a God above God and the Ein Sof and Ein Sof Ur and all that. So yeah. It does. I mean, even Gershom Scholem said Kabbalah is just Jewish Gnosticism. So
yeah, I mean that's one interpretation, but at the same time, again, you come back to this point: everything's perfect, everything's God's will.
That would definitely be so. Some can get pretty dualistic with the Kelepoth and demons and the deep. I forgot how you say that. Those evil demons in Judaism, but that's a whole lot of. That's another subject we could definitely get into. Vance, any questions or comments from the audience for yourself?
Let's see. I'm looking. I got lots of cows in the stable to gore, but we're running out of time. Consciousness there's no such thing as consciousness. Let's gore that sucker right out there, because if there's no consciousness, no free will, we don't have to worry about anything. How's that?
Yeah.
I just gored it. Yeah.
Gnosticism. I'll announce a topic for next spring when we do our kind of theological interview. Chris and I have got the subject of free will at the top of the list. I think we're kind of overdue on addressing that. We've got different ideas about that, so we will get to that eventually.
Yeah, that's always a fun one. Definitely a good one to wrap your brain around. Then, Christian, I wanted to get to you. How your experience being studying to be a Gnostic priest in Hoeller's church, have you changed, or how has that experience been? I mean, when you get into Gnosticism, it can get pretty edgy. It's almost like sometimes you have to go near the abyss, even though it really is a beautiful religion of light and fellowship and a lot of laughing. That's what people don't understand. You laugh a lot when you start studying Gnosticism for some reason. But how has the experience been for you?
Well, I might have gotten a little too close to the abyss and tumbled in. So I'm working on getting my way out. I'll let you know when I reach the light. When I get back to the pleroma, I will report. But
Revolution will be televised this time, or the Ascension will be televised.
That's right. But
YouTube. The apocalypse will be on YouTube.
Yeah.
No, I have a lot to learn, so I'm going to withhold comments until I both learn more and experience more. But I would like to comment just a little bit on Dr. Hoeller's tarot, since I am studying under Dr. Hoeller, and the tarot is a big thing at this church. Every year, Dr. Hoeller gives this big tarot reading for the whole nation. Mm-hmm. And there's a certain theoretical plausibility to it that Dr. Hoeller gives. Basically, it's, you know, he says, okay, the tarot doesn't divine anything about the external world, but it does tell us something about ourselves. And of course, when it tells us something about ourselves, because these images are archetypal and, you know, you got to intuit like what the meaning is for you. When you do that on a mass scale for the whole nation, you ought to get some sort of a fairly accurate reading of what's going to happen for the year, because of course, you know, the internal and the external are related to one another. And, you know, if we can divine what's going to happen to the collective psyche of the United States over the next year, we should be able to kind of intuit how the year is going to go for us in other ways. Of course, he didn't predict the virus, so maybe that's one of those external things that can't be predicted with the tarot. I don't know, but. So there's a certain amount of plausibility, I guess, to using the tarot as a divinatory tool. But here's the thing. I am fundamentally against using tools of divination, whether they're tarot or astrology or whatever, especially astrology. But the notion that somehow the cards are going to predict the future. I mean, let's face it, like, no matter how psychological we get about the cards, no matter how we relate the cards to the tree of life, blah, 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 people are going to use the cards to predict the future. That's what the tarot has always been used for. It's what it's always going to be used for. And that's, to me, incredibly dangerous. You can't predict the future with freaking cards. The cards are random, period. Now, Dr. Hoeller does say, okay, there's synchronicity, and you know, he tries to incorporate Carl Jung's theory of synchronicity into the interpretation of the cards. Okay, fine. I don't have a problem with that. But here's the thing about synchronicity. Synchronicity is acausal, which means synchronicity has nothing to do with what cards show up. The cards that are drawn are random. The synchronicity is inside of you. That is, a random set of cards comes up. There are archetypes. It has a certain meaning for you. The meaning that comes out of those is what we would call synchronicity. And the meaning that comes out of those could be I think of it as a communication from the divine. So the divine can speak through random events that happen in this world. When the divine does that, when it says, hey, such and such means such and such, okay, you're getting a whispering from God that then can cause a change inside of you, which can then affect the world. So yes, there is a connection through synchronicity between the world and God, but that doesn't mean that you can use the cards to predict the future. That has, you know, those are two basically unrelated things. You know, using the cards, a random set of cards, to try to predict the future is just flat out dangerous. And I had somebody give me a tarot reading who said, I am going to, that basically that I've got the whole universe behind me, that I cannot fail. And this was with regards to the stock market. Now, I didn't believe in his prediction. Nevertheless, it was sort of in the back of my mind as I was playing in the stock market and continuing to lose money. And I think it had a little bit of an influence on me in spite of my natural skepticism. So even though I'm
your broker, was it?
Yeah. What was that?
It wasn't your broker, was it?
Yeah.
Can't lose. Keep giving me that money.
So yeah, listen, none of these divinatory tools can work unless the universe is deterministic. The universe is deterministic. We don't have free will. And all of this Gnostic stuff is, you know, a bunch of hooey if we don't have free will. That's my bottom line.
All right. Yeah, well said. I guess from an apologetics point of view, I could just say, well, we all died in 2012. And so we're still in the grave. That's why these things don't work. But on a semi-serious note, I would say, yes, the center cannot hold. And as from the poem, and I think a lot of the old rules need to be thrown out this year. I do think it has to do something with 2012, and the old ways of magic, divination, and all that are falling apart. We must go to even more ancient primordial ones. And as you were saying, Christian, I think we still can count on archetypes and synchronicities, a lot of Jungian themes, because those are they're as eternal as Plato's world of ideas. They're both mystical, and they still work throughout history as they have. So, but that's my take.
Yeah, you know, if the tarot were only used for meditation and for exploring our inner psyches, hey, I'd be all for it. But we know that's not what it's going to be used for.
How about precognition, though? You know, my experience of the tarot is that you lay out these symbols, and you look and you think about all the things that you know about it, and the relationships and the planets and blah, 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 and the tree of life. And then, like, it's a way of loosening your mind up, and all of a sudden something will pop in there and you'll see it in the cards, but really it's a form of precognition. I had a scary experience. Here's another scary experience, very quick. I was really into tarot at this point in time. This is in the 80s. And somebody wanted me to read the cards. So I put out the cards. I used the Crowley deck. And I got the sun upside down and among, you know, other places in the layout. And I said, oh my God, this means death. So I said, yeah, I said to myself, yeah, but it doesn't really always have to mean death. And blah, 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 blah. A lot of people think the tower is death, or, you know, the devil, but really it's the sun upside down. So I gave him a wishy-washy thing. Well, you know, this usually means death, but it doesn't really have to mean death. And I gave means a transformation and blah, blah, blah. That's so a few months later, he was in the hospital with AIDS. He died.
Oh.
So I kind of stopped reading cards after that.
Oh, that's sad.
Actually, I think, yeah, it was precognition. I think
reading cards.
What's that?
Oh man, I would take that as encouragement to continue reading cards. I mean,
no, I don't want to know the future. No, not horrible futures for people. Who wants to really know that? You know, I didn't want to know it then.
I totally agree, Vance. I mean, the cards can be used as a stimulant to precognition, right? And that's where I was trying to explain how synchronicity can come into play there. But if anybody see the temptation though is that people are going to think that the cards that are drawn are the cards that were meant to be drawn. That's how people tend to read them. And if you're thinking that the angels are in there, like shuffling the cards around, you're just fooling yourself.
Yeah, how do they do that? You know, sneak in there.
Well, they're on a pin. They're too busy being on a pin.
Ah, yeah, they're that small. They can pull it off.
How they get a hold of these giant cards. So. Well, awesome. Well, I think we are getting towards the end. It's been a great conversation. We've gone to so many religions and disciplines, and somehow been able to keep some sort of semblance of continuity. I think so, unless I'm just so used to the high weirdness. Everything makes sense to me, except the real world. But this kind of stuff is just perfect. But before we go, Vance, is there any last questions for the audience?
I was just looking. Anybody out there, if you got a question, put it out there now, because I don't see any for the foreseeable past here. Anybody? Hurry up and type. We'll wait for a second.
Well,
if you want.
let me pop in and invite people that you know, when this is posted on YouTube, if people want to suggest some topics for next year, we got plenty to cover, like alchemy and the Knights Templar and whatever. We'll start making the list for next Halloween. We're going to leave a few cows alive.
Yeah, not like this year. We didn't touch Jesus though. He got scot-free.
I think we've been there so many shows, Vance. We've done it. Every Jesus theory under the sun.
Did we talk about Honey the circle drawer? I bet you we didn't.
No, I don't think we did. I think, yeah, but we definitely gored some of these sacred cows.
Who made the tarot? There's there's one of the last questions there.
Who made the tarot?
Somebody in Italy, I believe.
Merlin.
Supposedly the god Thoth made the tarot. Of course, that's according to myth.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I kind of wish that was true. That's a Crowley myth, by the way.
Is it?
Oh.
Yeah, Crowley came up with that. That whole the book of Thoth is the his book on the tarot, and it's an excellent book. But yeah, I think it was made up, and the major arcana was added in Italy in the 15th century, 14th, 15th century. That's what I've heard. The playing cards were first, which really pissed me off when I heard about it, because I think that the tarot should be like mystical, and then they degraded it and made it mundane. But no, it was the other way around. From the ridiculous to the sublime. What can I say?
It happens, but truth shall set us free in the end. So awesome. Well, for you audience, thanks for coming. I hope you've enjoyed our little Halloween special. As mentioned, we'll have one next Saturday. We'll get pretty even edgier and darker as we discuss demons and Clive Barker. Anybody want to talk about Needlehead? And our guest will be Anthony Tyler. I think the occult fan will be joining us. Vance will be there, so it should be a good time. And a lot of great shows coming in November. So if you want to get away from the insanity of the real world and the election and that what is truly an illusion, or more like bad software, I would say. But we have some great topics, including Atlantis, ancient high tech. We're going to have shows on fractal theology, multiple dimensions. We're going to have a lot of very cool topics. We're going to have a show on the nature of evil and the origins of evil, and a whole bunch of, so the year will go well. Don't forget, we will also have a Finding Hermes out in a couple of weeks. So hope you guys can catch that. The Finding Hermes program is going very good. We're having some great meetings and providing some very authentic and mind-blowing and game-changing Gnostic exercises from ancient times that are pretty loyal and are pretty unique. So please join us there if you can. Other than that, I don't think I have. Yeah, please support the show in any way you can, sharing, becoming a member, telling your friends. I'll take a free tarot read if you want to give me one of those so I can predict the future, which just kidding. I have good friends who are great tarot readers. And
yeah, slide that sun out of the deck.
Yeah, I learn a lot about myself. That's what I want to know. As above, so below, as inside, so outside. So, but we are at the end, I believe. So first of all, I'd like to say, Scott and Sandra, thank you very much once again for coming on Aeon Byte.
Yes, it was a very good bite.
You
took a bite out of things, didn't we?
Yeah, they bit back hard. And Christian, always good having you here at the virtual Alexandria's, like I like to say, and we look forward to talking a little free will if we have a choice next year. If it's fated.
I
Help
hope
it.
it's fated.
So awesome. Always good to see you. And the Moondog Vance, thanks for being here with your Halloween Christmas backdrop or whatever.
And my scary stories. Don't forget my scary stories.
Yes, God, I know.
And Scott and Sandra. I have to apologize that my aunt was named Sandra, but that was a true story. So
apology accepted.
Yeah. Okay, good. And Chris, always good to see you here. Thanks for showing up, and we'll wait till next time. We'll see you all next time.
Likewise. Well, audience, thank you very much for coming. And as I like to say, thanks for being here. Thanks for being yourself, your true self, here in the desert of the real. And definitely write your own gospel, live your own myth, or Jehovah will hire a ghostwriter to do so. And we don't want that.
Holy Ghost writer.
A scary writer. So I think that's it. And thank you very much.